Hello and good evening. I know this has been a difficult time for everyone, so I want to thank you all for participating and joining tonight on this webinar. My name is Cindy Chan-Rubik, and I am an Assistant Commissioner with the Department of Planning and Development. I have a few fellow colleagues on the panel with me tonight. Kathy Dickett, who is a Managing Deputy Commissioner with DPD, Noah Safraniak, he manages the Plan Commission, and Josh Sun, he is one of our Central Region planners. Co-hosting the webinar tonight with me is Alderman Burnett from the 27th Ward and Alderman Hopkins from the 2nd Ward, both of whom would like to say a few words of welcome to everyone as well. We'll start with Alderman Burnett.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate all of you all's patience with us and also the City of Chicago. These planners have been working on this for a while. As you all know, there have been a lot of changes in a lot of our industrial areas. This area here it has always been a buffer area, and it has been evolving. And I think the planning department wants to show you all what ideas that they have about the evolution of the community. So please be patient with us. Everyone's concerns are very important to us, and thank you all very much.
Thank you, Alderman Burnett. Alderman Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. I want to echo my colleagues' comments, and I also want to point out that many people on this call have commented to me over the years that one of the criticisms of the planning department is it doesn't really do proactive planning, it reacts. Well, this is a proactive initiative from the professionals in the planning department. People with advanced degrees in architecture, urban planning, design. This is what they were trained to do, which is to be forward thinking and to be allowed to use their expertise to apply in a vision of the direction that our city needs to go. This is a staff initiative. They did the preliminary work and brought it to me and Alderman Burnett as something that they feel very strongly about that they want to move forward to. So to all of you who have said over the years that the planning department doesn't do enough planning, well, here they are. And I think it's an exciting concept. As Alderman Burnett said, it's in recognition of many things that have already occurred organically over the last 2 decades. But it's also a forward-thinking document about the direction that we want this very vibrant part of the city of Chicago to embark upon. So that's not to say there aren't some changes that could be made. That's why we're here, to get your input as community members and stakeholders, how you think we can improve upon this initial draft that you're about to see. So your comments and your feedback are welcome. In recognition of the limitations of this format, what I'd like to say is we'll answer as many questions as we can tonight, but anyone who has some additional comments or feedback that they feel would be more appropriate for a dialogue, send me an email, and within 48 hours, you're going to get a phone call from me, and we can talk through this one-on-one. So this is not the end of your opportunity to participate in this process and to comment. And with that, I'll turn it back to Cindy.
Thank you, Alderman Hopkins. Thank you for your comments and the welcoming words. So the agenda for tonight, we've gone through the introductions already. I will provide a very brief summary of what's in the 2010 Halstead Triangle Plan, and then I'll go through some of the city-led initiatives since the 2010 plan, and then go through a summary of what's in the chapter update. And then we did receive many questions in advance of the webinar, so we'll go through those questions and answers. And we'll also try to answer some of the questions. If you see there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and if you have a question you want to submit, then please feel free to do so, and our panelists will try to answer them live during tonight's webinar. So why are we updating the 2010 Halstead Triangle Plan? Well, as I said, there's been a lot of significant planning initiatives and land use changes impacting and around this area. And specifically during the North Branch framework planning process, the department received multiple requests from the public to update this Halstead Triangle Plan. So now that we've completed the North Branch framework plan, of course, we wanted to circle back on this plan. So just right up front, what's included in the draft chapter update versus what's not included. Here's just a few bullets. We did include a summary of initiatives since 2010. We've included some data on recent trends and information on demographics, as well as guidance on future development. What's not included is there's no recommendation to change any process for the public review of future development. And there's also no specific zoning ordinance map changes or zoning ordinance code changes recommended as part of this plan. So the area in question here is, you see in the black dashed triangular shaped area bounded by Halstead Street to the east, the River Branch Canal on the west, North Avenue to the north, and Division Street to the south. This area, of course, the planned manufacturing district of Goose Island is still to the west of this area across the North Branch Canal. And then the CTA Red Line station has a stop right at North and Clybourne within the boundaries of this plan area. The existing plan from 2010 talked a lot about the existing conditions, many of which actually still exist. There's large surface parking lots. There's some lack of pedestrian activity, lack of open spaces. Streets and sidewalks are not pedestrian friendly. But the main part about the plan was, the area is predominantly zoned C3-5, which does not allow residential uses. And the plan did not recommend any future zoning changes to allow for residential uses. The plan did include guidance for Riverwalk and street section improvements as well. So here's some photos taken a couple months ago of the current conditions. You see a lot of low scale retail buildings, 1 to 2 story retail buildings.
I'm sorry, Cindy.
Yes.
I don't see. I see you. I don't see the what you're trying to show. Are you trying to show us something?
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. Do you all see the photos? Do the rest of you see the photos?
Maybe it's me. Maybe
yes,
it's me.
the photos are up.
Yeah, I see them.
Oh, maybe I got a problem here. I got it now. I got it. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's all right. There's also, you can see on the top right, an example of kind of a blank facade that's not really creating a great pedestrian experience. So, 5% because of the zoning restriction here, the C3-5, and the plan that doesn't recommend any future changes to allow residential uses. We only have 5% of land uses that contain residential. So the predominant one, of course, is the Sono project. This was started prior to the C3 zoning that was put in place, and it was erected as part of a court ruling. So the city-led initiative since 2010, really the primary one is the North Branch Framework Plan that most of you are familiar with. This reduced the planned manufacturing district area, limiting it to Goose Island, and allowed for mixed uses north and south of the industrial corridor. The 3 primary goals of the plan were to keep the industrial corridor as a vital economic engine and a job center. The second goal was to improve transportation modes, all transportation modes. And the third goal was to build upon the unique natural assets and built environment of the corridor. And as you know, the zoning change was implemented on the north and south sections to allow for mix of uses, including residential use. So CDOT has also published 2 documents, the Complete Streets Design Guidelines from 2013. places pedestrians first in the multimodal hierarchy and provides standard street cross-section designs. Vision Zero Action Plan was completed in 2017, and it outlines the city's commitment and approach to eliminating deaths by traffic crashes. The Affordable Housing Ordinance was last updated into 2015, and there's also in this area, it overlaps the Near North Arrow pilot, and that requires 20% of the units at affordable prices, and it is set to expire at the end of this year. And then the following three initiatives, I do have separate slides for those, so I will go ahead and explain those updates. A lot of the questions we received were about updates for the Wild Mile initiative, and this was initially envisioned as part of the North Branch Framework Plan. The Wild Mile, the planning process was completed last June, and the community expressed a desire to reclaim the river as a natural amenity, as a place to walk, and to get a reprieve from the hustle and bustle of Halsted Street. $1.4 million in open space impact fees will be used to construct the first phase of the Wild Mile Boardwalk that will stretch from Whole Foods to REI store. And this work is pending permit approval by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We would expect to start later this year. So that's very exciting. And of course, we have the transit served location ordinance that was adopted in 2013, expanded and updated in 2015, and expanded to include bus routes in 2019. But projects within a quarter mile of the North and Clybourne Red Line station are eligible for parking reductions, height increases, floor area increases, and minimum lot area reductions. This station was also renovated in 2010. That was part of a deal between Apple and the CTA. The Apple store, they were given advertising rights at the station. And in exchange, they provided $4 million to do some station renovations. They were mostly just cosmetic renovations though. I did want to point out, and this data is in the chapter update, that the ridership levels at this station and nearby stations and the bus routes within this area have also slightly declined in recent years. That is likely due, we think, to increased use in bicycles as well as rideshare usage. So as you are all familiar with our bicycle system, the Divvy system, this was launched in 2013, very successful. It's grown to include 600 stations and over 6,000 bicycles throughout the city. Rideshare, as many of you know as well, has grown a lot, 271% in recent years, actually. So earlier this year, the city did implement a new tax structure that places a premium on single rides during peak times and decreased rates for shared rides in the neighborhoods. And a portion of the generated revenue will be allocated to support public transit investments in the future. So the chapter update includes quite a bit of data information as well as some trends. So this slide just kind of summarized some of the highlights. We have seen, of course, 10% population growth in this community area, the Near North community area, between 2010 and 2017. That's compared to the overall city, which only grew during that same time frame, 1%. In this community area, 60% of the households are one-person households, 32% of the households are families. A very high percentage, 63% of residents in the Near North take transit, bicycle, and or walk to work, and only 35% of residents own a car. And this next bullet is a really important one as well. It's about retail vacancy, this vacancy has increased. It's doubled since 2014 to 2018, from 6.4% to 12.8% along the Clybourne retail corridor. And of course, this was from 2018. So we do expect and anticipate, because of the COVID pandemic and all of the retail, would have, likely higher vacancy rate based on that situation. You know, whenever we talk about residential uses versus retail uses, there's questions about traffic congestion, and we've anticipated that. So we did include some information about these use types and their relative vehicular trip generation rates. And residential uses have a much lower vehicle trip generation rate than retail uses. So that's a very important point to make. And then also when we talk about adding residential uses, you know, the impact to schools and CPS schools, specifically the neighborhood schools, are important to look at. And for this boundary, it's within the Ogden International boundary and the Ogden International Elementary School boundary and the Lincoln Park High School boundary. And both of these were identified by CPS as having efficient levels of enrollment. And that is the status level for 2019-2020 year. So here's also some photos of projects that have been approved or completed in the Halstead Triangle area or nearby. So on the bottom left is New City. A lot of you are familiar with that project. It was completed in 2015 and has 360,000 square feet of retail space and a 19-story apartment building with 119 units. This is right outside the boundary of the Halstead Triangle area. The REI store was also recently completed, and this faces the North Branch Canal and has a great kayak launch and will be part of the Wild Mile experience and boardwalk. The shops of Big Deal, which the renderings are shown on the top right of this slide. This was approved last fall and will include up to 150,000 square feet of retail and commercial space, a climbing gym, and also 18,000 square feet of open space, and which includes a dog park. And you'll see that rendering on the top right. And then the bottom left image, many of you are familiar with the Lincoln Yards proposal, and that was approved by City Council last April. And this is outside of the Halstead Triangle area, but it's just northwest of it, and will include up to 14 million square feet of new commercial and residential uses, 21 acres of open space, and will include infrastructure and transit improvements as well. So the plan from 2012 included 12 objectives, and the draft update includes revisions to 4 of them highlighted here in red. So I'll go through each one by one. So the first, to promote connectivity between modes, between uses, and between the natural and built environments. 2, support and create opportunities for development that is compatible with and enhances the neighborhood. Promote and support non-residential uses along the river, given existing intensity of industrial uses on the eastern side of Goose Island. And that is talking about really more specifically the waste management site and property along the eastern, that stretches along the eastern side of Goose Island. 4 is provide the opportunity for a continuous river walk and connecting non-vehicular path system. So that's talking about this. Now we have the Wild Mile initiative. Manage traffic congestion on primary streets in the study area by focusing on a multimodal transportation solution. So we still do encourage that, especially with the transit served location ordinance. And then 6, develop a parking strategy that balances anticipated demand with minimizing traffic congestion. 7 is create pedestrian-friendly streetscapes that connect the neighborhoods. 8 is create strong connections to and from the Riverwalk. And again, that would be part of the Wild Mile initiative. Encourage development compatible with the adjacent Goose Island planned manufacturing district in the buffer zone between the river and Kingsbury Street. So this is the important distinction here, is we are reducing the size of the buffer zone just to the canal from Kingsbury versus the entire area of the Halstead Triangle plan. And then 10, we want to promote design excellence consistent with urban design best practices and department policies. We are always striving to promote sustainable development practices, and we want to develop a neighborhood wayfinding system. So here's just a graphic that kind of shows this buffer zone area between Kingsbury and the North Branch Canal. In this zone is where we would like to see development that's compatible with the industrial uses on the east side of Goose Island. So we would not want to have residential uses, and we would not want to see outdoor dining or outdoor entertainment uses within this buffer zone. The rest of the area east of Kingsbury would be considered the mixed use zone, where we would look to see future zoning changes for a mix of uses. And for new PD projects within this whole area, we would prioritize alternative modes of transportation. Of course, we want to improve the pedestrian experience. We want high quality design, and we would ask for a school impact study if it's warranted by the amount of residential units the proposal is requesting. So the benefits of allowing residential uses, of course, well, it will increase the development potential of the parcels in this area, which should lead to fewer parking lots and, low scale 1 to 2 story, buildings. It encourages increased density and walkability near the Red Line station, consistent with our transit served location ordinance and goals. Also important to note, new residential units require open space impact fees to be paid by the developer. And those open space impact fees can then be used for the Wild Mile or other new open space improvements. And new residential units will also trigger the affordable requirements ordinance. And so that's also an important point. And this is just an excerpt from our zoning code, just highlighting the relevant plan development triggers that would be for an underlying C3-5 zoning. So any project that would be within 100, new construction within 100 feet of the river, if it includes retail over 75,000 square feet or more, if it's more than 4 acres of net site area, or if the building heights are over 70 to 80 feet, and the threshold depends on the lot frontage, or if the project proposes more than 100 residential units. There's more specific requirements in that zoning section, but these are kind of the highlights. Okay, so before we get to the questions and answers that we received, the questions that we received, I do want to explain the next steps. We will be posting, we're recording the webinar right now. We'll be posting the recording on the DPD webpage. We'll continue to gather public feedback, as Alderman Hopkins and Alderman Burnett explained at the beginning. And then we will finalize the chapter update, and we do want to present it to a future Chicago Plan Commission meeting for adoption. Okay, and then just so you know, I'll go back to this before slide, but just so you know, the website page that I'm talking about is www.cityofchicago.gov/Halsted Triangle. And if you have any questions, follow-up comments, you can also email them to dpd@cityofchicago.org. But I'll just go back to this slide for now, and we can go through some of the questions that we received, and some of my panelists will be helping to answer these. So the first question was, they were curious about green space planned in the triangle, and other folks had questions about the Wild Mile updates. So I did explain a little bit about the Wild Mile update, but again, more specifically, $1.4 million in open space impact fees was granted to Neighbor Space near North Unity and Urban Rivers to design and construct the first boardwalk section between Whole Foods and REI. And then we also have that open space that was approved as part of the Shops a Big Deal project, 18,000 square feet, which includes publicly accessible open space and a dog run. And we would continue to push and advocate for, open spaces as part of larger scale plan development projects. Kathy, I don't know if you have anything to add to that response. I can stop sharing the screen too.
I know yeah, I think that's right, Cindy. And I would encourage everyone to, reach out to either Neighbor Space Urban Rivers or Near North Unity if you want to get involved, because this is very much a community-driven type of open space along the North Branch Canal.
Yes, good. Thanks, Kathy. And Near North Unity, they're also connecting with nearby schools, right, to develop a program to use the
Right.
Wild Mile as an outdoor nature classroom. So
Right.
we definitely want this to be a community-based amenity. Okay, so the next question was someone wanted us to provide details on affordable housing plans or RFPs. Affordable housing plans, we would be looking at future projects that would have residential uses, assuming this update gets adopted by Plan Commission. And then those projects would have to comply with the affordable housing requirements. And then there's also CHA owns land, southeast of here. And they have been issuing some RFPs over the last few years, but there's no specific RFP within the triangle boundary that we're aware of. And then someone had a question about the specific affordable housing project at New City. Noah, do you want to answer that, or Alderman Burnett?
I can start with the zoning based, and then if the Alderman wants to add some comments, he is more than welcome to. So the affordable housing component is a thin strip of land that runs, if Eastman were extended east of Halstead. That project is still on the books. They have selected a new developer to partner with, which is Evergreen Development. And they are actually in the process of developing construction documents and plan to move forward soon on that site.
Great, thank you. Alderman Burnett, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, Cindy. So a lot of people may or may not know that when that project was approved, we didn't even have the ARO in place. So they got approved. They had actually got approved for that project and didn't have a requirement for affordable housing. We negotiated a deal with them to put in affordable housing. They did not put it into the building that they built. So we continue to commit them to the deal that they had. So now they're going to put it on that space over there. But they did not have an official requirement for affordable housing. We encouraged them to do affordable housing. And so, yes, they're going to build the affordable housing.
Great, thank you for the update, Alderman.
And Cindy, this is Kevin Margnus. If you want to just ask everybody who's a panelist to turn on their cameras if they're able and stop sharing the screen, I think that will be good to move over to that.
I'm happy to stop sharing the screen.
Okay, good deal.
All right. The other question was about independent traffic study and what will be done to address traffic congestion in the Halstead Triangle area. So we did get a lot of questions directed to CDOT. So I'll let Bill Higgins, if you can unmute yourself and respond to that question, please.
Sure. There's not an independent traffic study as part of this update right now. As we move forward and get new developments coming in the area that go through the plan development process, they'll certainly be reviewed by CDOT and often required to produce a traffic study of their own. Right now, given the slowdown of the city, if not shutdown over COVID, there's a lot of limitations we have in doing traffic studies because traffic counts are way off. So we have a lot of our work right now being delayed in terms of doing long-term and regional traffic studies for that reason. I think that's pretty much it regarding the traffic study in general.
Okay. Did you want to talk about our CDOT's plans to widen Division Street at all? Because that should improve traffic congestion, at least east-west along Division Street, right? With the bridge replacement and
right.
so forth.
Yeah, the bridge replacement's underway. I believe the temporary bridges are up now, and they're going to be putting in the new permanent bridges in the very near future. This will add lanes to Division Street that will add more capacity in the region.
Great, thank you. Okay, the
Bill,
next.
I'm sorry, Cindy, Bill, before we move off the bridges, sorry, if you could
Sure.
talk a little bit about how we're going to carefully coordinate the Division Street Bridge work with Chicago Avenue bridges and with the work on Cortland and Webster bridges, so it minimizes detours.
Absolutely. All of those bridges are in queue for replacement, and they're all being coordinated to minimize the detours. The Chicago Avenue Bridge has a replacement bridge, and now that work won't move forward until after the Division Street bridges are done. Cortland is probably a ways down the road at this point before we even start the temporary bridge or replacement of that bridge. So first will come Division. Once that's open and working 100%, then we'll reclose Chicago Avenue to replace that bridge as well, and moving on from there.
Great, thank you, Bill. The next question was, why does it smell like trash in the Halstead Triangle and Goose Island areas on days above 80 degrees? This is really because of the waste management site that stretches along the eastern edge of Goose Island. And, you know, it's just a reality of life, honestly. We need to have garbage services. We're humans, we actually create a lot of garbage, unfortunately. And so these waste areas are kind of needed throughout the city, and there's not that many of them. And so, and this is a plant that is why Goose Island is a planned manufacturing area. But you know, unfortunately, the smell is something that is a result of that. So that is really part of the reason why we are looking at the buffer area between Kingsbury and the river, to not include residential uses there, and to not have outdoor uses like outdoor dining or entertainment, really because of that situation.
And Cindy, you know, even going further back, I think that was one of the reasons that we put the PMD in the first place. And that was one of the reasons that why we initially didn't want to allow for residential to be in the Halsted Triangle at all. Correct. Because we didn't want people to complain about the garbage and also have impact on the existing businesses that are there. And that's why the Department of Planning has been so stern on not allowing it to happen. And then even city was spending all that money in that lawsuit, even though we lost. But the city has come a long way and see that people can live with it. And if people go in knowing that this is what they're going to move next to, that's on them, and that's fine.
Right. That's exactly right, Alderman Burnett. And we see this as kind of a compromise solution where we retain the buffer zone for that strip along the river, but the east of Kingsbury, we would allow a mix of uses, including residential. That's exactly what this plan is about. Okay, so there's a question here about protected bike lanes and whether or not there will be areas to linger and sit with native plants and drainage. So again, you know, the Wild Mile is a place that is being developed for walking, and will have landscaping included as part of that installation. Protected bike lanes, there are bike lanes along Halstead. And I don't know, Bill, if you have any other, anything to add to that in terms of bike lanes?
Yeah, right now we have existing protected bike lanes on Clybourne, south of the Triangle, and buffered bike lanes to the north. Halstead has buffered bike lanes south of the Triangle, and traditional bike lanes, I believe, north of the area. Nothing is planned in the immediate area in the future, but there is a number of new bike lanes being planned through Lincoln yards, and that's going to connect in the long run to the transitway that's concept that's in the North Branch Framework Plan. As far as open seating and streets and those type of efforts throughout the shutdown, we've been looking at that very closely, and you may have heard we've been executing some trials of some limited traffic streets and closed streets for that purpose. And we're going to continue looking at those in this area as well. Right now, CDOT's Vision Zero goals are primary, and we're working to create pedestrian-oriented streetscapes as appropriate. So we'll continue looking in this area as well.
Thanks, Bill. The next question is there an updated zoning plan that we can review that caters to the area's wants and needs? So the chapter update is a draft plan update, but a specific zoning plan, it does not contain specific zoning map changes that would occur as part of each applicant's map change request. And that, all of those, any future map amendments, zoning map amendments, or plan development projects that would modify the zoning map would require future review and approval by City Council. And so there would be a public process for those parcel specific zoning map changes. There was a question about why has there been no implementation of metered parking? And there was a specific request to include metered parking along Kingsbury. So there is metered parking along Halstead, as well as some of the streets close to the North and Clybourne station. But I'll hand it over to CDOT to respond about additional metered parking.
Well, metered parking is really regulated by the Department of Finance, and we'll assist where we can in finding wherever there's on-street parking that's not metered. We'll work with the local alderman to determine if it should be metered, and then Department of Finance can either move metered parking there or install it to expand metered parking options.
Thanks, Bill. Alderman Burnett, do you have anything to add to that question? Oh, you're still on mute.
In reference to which question? I apologize.
It's okay. The question about metered parking, and there was a specific request for metered parking along Kingsbury. And so I don't know your thoughts about metered parking, or if you had anything to add to Bill's response.
Yeah, we can look into it. Since someone heard that they were looking for metered parking over there, that some people were looking for metered parking over there. Folks are actually trying to get me to remove their meter parking and put it over here, right? So, but we have to look at it overall, because as you know, whenever we do remove meter parking, we have to find somewhere else to put the meter parking. So I think we're owed some areas where we need to put some meter parking at anyway. So I don't have a problem with that. I know businesses want that. I think that may change if and when more residents come.
All right. Thank you, Alderman. And then the following question was, how does this plan affect the Ranch Triangle Association, Alderman Hopkins? I believe the Ranch Triangle Association is an active group in your board. Did you want to respond to that? Are you able to respond to that?
Yeah. As I said at the outset of the meeting, I'm willing to have an offline discussion with Mr. Listener or anyone from Ranch Triangle with regard to your specific input to make this a better plan. It affects your area and your residents as well. So if you want to comment now and based on what you've seen, or if you need to digest this a little more or have some of the people on your committee that have some planning expertise, we do have time. This will eventually go to Plan Commission, but it is not scheduled now for a date for Plan Commission. So you have time to look a little more closely at this and decide if it's right for your community, and if not, what changes would need to be made in order to make it more palpable to you. So give me a call. Let's talk in the next couple of days on this.
Thank you, Alderman Hopkins. The next question, why increase the number of storefronts in the area when there are already many infilled ones and maybe vacant ones? And that is a good question. Our goal for this plan is not to necessarily increase the number of storefronts. We're actually trying to look at a balance of uses, right? So we're encouraging a mix of uses and not just rely on just the retail and commercial use. So by allowing residential uses, we would see really, a different kind of development come forward. Then the next question, will the city recommend or mandate developers to contribute for public playgrounds and dog parks, as there is a serious deficiency? So yes, there's already for any new residential units, there's an open space impact fee requirement payment that is paid for by the developer at the time of permit application. And then for large scale developments, we do often negotiate with the developer to try to include open space if, as much as possible. And the Shops at Big Deal is a good example of that, and that was approved last fall, as I said in the presentation, and includes an 18,000 square foot open space that has a dog park designed in it. So that hasn't been built yet, but that was approved last fall by City Council and Chicago Plan Commission. So the next question was about, again, traffic congestion, but related to new buildings. And so we do have a process for that. And Bill Higgins can kind of clarify that for new plan development projects. CDOT does require, quite a bit of review and submission of studies and so on by applicants.
I'm sorry, Cindy, what was it that you wanted me to respond to on that?
Just if you wanted to clarify CDOT's role in reviewing traffic studies and implementation of traffic mitigation measures by developers as part of plan development projects.
Sure. Whenever there's a plan development project, it has to get approved by my section at CDOT. The Public Way Policy section manages the Plan Review Committee, which looks at a number of things in any private development, from the impact to the public way that the new development has. That's looking at retail square footage, the number of parking spaces on the site, the number of units, also as public and private bike parking as well. And depending on the size of the site, we determine what level of study the development needs to do. If they have a large impact, we might have a very extensive study where they're looking at the impact to surrounding traffic signals and transit and pretty much everything to do with transportation. Once they submit to us, there's usually a few rounds of back and forth where we provide comments on both the traffic study, if there's one, or on the site plan itself, to give design recommendations. And before agreeing to approve the project to move forward to Plan Commission, we come to an agreement with the developer on what needs to be done to improve infrastructure in the area, or how they should design their site plan to minimize impacts, and if we can create a net improvement in traffic in the area.
Great, thanks, Bill. How will the next question, how will current public health, hygiene, and social distancing concerns be factored into new developments henceforth? So a very good question. Obviously, the current health pandemic, there's all these concerns with social distancing and how we are going to open up and gather and so forth. But in terms of how it will impact future development, that's obviously something that the development community is still grappling with, I think. We have heard from various developers for commercial space anyway. It may be that office tenants will actually need larger floor plates than what had been previously considered, because maybe they'll need more space, right, between each working station. Or residents may want to choose to live closer to where they work. So areas like the Halsted Triangle and the near north community area may seem maybe even more appealing to new buyers, because maybe people will want to walk and bike to work rather than drive or take transit. But of course, this is all still developing, and we're still, monitoring the situation very closely. The next question is kind of related to that. What are the factors that can affect the proposed timeline? And I'm assuming that the person who submitted this question meant the timeline for finalizing the chapter update and bringing it forward to the Chicago Plan Commission for review and adoption. And so that is a good question. Obviously, we're wanting to give a chance for the community and the public to give input and provide their input, and we'll need time to kind of consider that input and update the chapter itself. But we're also mindful of the fact that we want to position this area to be able to grow and redevelop, especially with the impact of the COVID pandemic on the retail market specifically. And because the existing zoning here doesn't, allow residential, and the current plan in place doesn't recommend residential uses anywhere within this triangle, we think that that's really limiting the development potential of this area, given its proximity to downtown. And there's a lot of transit. There's not just the CTA station, but there's, really high capacity bus routes along Halstead and so on. So we think that it's good to reposition this area, as soon as possible, so they can come out of this stronger and better. So the next question is, how can we support youth sports in the area? So there is Park District Park. The Stanton Park has sports fields just east of this Halsted Triangle area. The Park District is also renovating the Near North Park at Laramie and Blackhawk. And then new recreational fields are proposed and was incorporated in the plan development proposal at Lincoln Yards. And there's the fleet fields, the temporary recreation fields that have already been installed. Alderman Hopkins, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I think I've covered it. So if I can move on to the next question.
Yeah, just briefly, that Lincoln Yards Fleet Fields will be moving forward with a plan for a youth basketball program along with a youth soccer program, with rules modified to reflect socially distant play. So look for an announcement on that in the next couple of weeks.
Great. Thank you, Alderman. That's good to know. The next comment: often cars do not slow or stop at the pedestrian crossing on Blackhawk and Halstead. Is there a plan to improve pedestrian safety? Bill Higgins, can you unmute yourself and respond to that question?
I'm not aware of the issue specifically at Blackhawk and Halstead. I'll look into that, but we're constantly looking to improve pedestrian safety in the city. It's our #1 goal.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Also, there was a new traffic light installed nearby that intersection at Schiller and Halstead, and that was installed by the developer for new city development.
That's right.
Yep. Okay. Then I think that there's a few others here. One is a comment about the area being saturated with rental and condominium buildings. And so, I just wanted to reiterate again, there's really only in this particular area, there's really only one large residential project, and that is the Sono project. And then one other question was about how do minorities benefit from grants? So I just wanted to clear up, the plan chapter update, we don't mention grants or incentives, but all planned development projects do have minority participation goals. And Noah, do you want to expand on that executive order that we have
Sure.
on planned development projects?
Sure. So just about 2 years ago or so now, Mayor Emanuel at the time implemented an executive order. The executive order made it mandatory that any project going before the Chicago Planning Commission would have goals placed upon it in an attempt to achieve WMBE goals in line with other like RFPs or RDAs, redevelopment agreements, and requests for proposals throughout the city and various other departments. So the idea was to get a goal of 26% minority participation, 6% women participation, and 50% of work hours to be City of Chicago residents. Of course, the executive order is just a goal. It's a framework and an attempt to get more participation and to encourage that to happen. It's not an ordinance mandate, but that's what we have in place to use as a tool. And majority of the developers, I would say almost all of them, have strived to hit these goals, have pledged to hit these goals, both at the time of Plan Commission approval and also then again at the time of coming into building permits. We do not have any regular offenders or serial offenders to that executive order that we know of at this point in time.
And I also have my own executive order where we encourage every developer to have their contractor to joint venture with a minority contractor.
Thank you, Alderman. Okay. And then the next, and this kind of the next question kind of builds on that, Alderman. It's asking about affordable housing requirements in this area. I mentioned this is within the pilot, but I know you also have some strong position on affordable housing as well for new planned development projects.
Yeah, so regardless of this project or not, everything in our area, we have a pilot program and you have to do 20% affordable.
Correct.
So that's regardless if we change this or not. Anywhere else in the pilot program, you have to do it. So right now on the Greyhound project that's proposed, they have to do it. On the Tribune project that's proposed, they have to do it. And there's a myriad of other projects throughout the area where everybody is having some affordable. One of the things, why all of this, these things that's happening right now with all of the protests and everything is because we're not mixing people in with each other. And we're segregating ourselves from each other, so we don't understand each other, nor do we respect each other. So having a mixture of affordable housing in all the areas where they are is very helpful for our cultures. Thank you.
I completely agree with you. Okay, and another following question about what about the city's sustainability targets? And so we do have, for planned development projects, we do have the department's sustainability policy. So, and that gets updated from time to time. But the current requirement is, we have a menu of points that we need to get, that developers would need to get, and new construction has to achieve 100 points. So that, there's a menu of options such as getting LEED certification or other kinds of certification, planning, green roof and that sort of thing. But there's all sorts of requirements to meet that policy. The next question, really, I'll have Noah respond to. What is the current status on the previously planned residential tower on Fremont and Weed Street?
All right, yes, so some of them are in the attendees list listening, so they'll probably be very happy to hear this chapter update. The CRM team they did file an application with us back in 2018, July of 2018. They've been very patient with the city. We have been keeping them aware of our desire to look at the Halstead plan, update the Halstead plan. We're probably not moving at the pace that they would like to see us move, but we have stayed consistent and stayed the course. They've made some changes at our recommendation. They've been consistently negotiating and redeveloping and resculpting their proposals. So it's still an active, ongoing proposal. It is not on any foreseeable future agenda, like not in the next month or 2 months. We made it very clear that the department needed to straighten out this piece of important planning to make sure we got the area done correctly and that we accounted for all of the impacts that would come along with residential being added as a use. And they are staying patient and awaiting our direction as we speak.
Thanks, Noah. A question about North Avenue. Will that be widened? North Avenue is an IDOT route. So, we do recognize that traffic along North Avenue can be problematic during peak times, especially. But because it's an IDOT route, it's not easily modified due to the state regulations. Bill, did you have anything to add to that, or is that pretty?
I would add, that's absolutely right. I would just add that while we are widening division bridges to improve circulation, widening is not always the only answer or the best answer. Widening increases capacity, but that doesn't always alleviate traffic. It just brings more traffic. So we always have to take a very careful look at the best option when we're trying to find solutions to these kind of things.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Yeah, unfortunately, widening North Avenue just isn't a viable option from an engineering standpoint. But when General Iron eventually closes permanently, that is 600 trucks a day that will disappear from North Avenue, 600. And even though they're closed right now, they're still moving scrap. So there's probably somewhere around 300 trucks a day still moving on North Avenue using the driveway at 1066 North Avenue. So removing 600 large trucks a day at the end of this year when they permanently close will be a noticeable difference in traffic congestion on North Avenue.
Thanks, Alderman Hopkins. The following questions are about the public transportation. Will there be better public transportation? And when will the North and Clybourne station be made ADA accessible, since this was not done with the Apple renovation? Well, generally, again, this area has very good access to public transportation. With CTA Red Line buses along Halstead North and Division. And also the red purple CTA line is being modernized, and that will improve capacity and improve travel times. There's also in the North Branch Framework Plan, the planned future transitway down from within the Goose Island area. So that should improve public transportation for that initiative. And for the specific question about the ADA accessibility, I did talk with CTA folks, and this was identified for a phase 2 of CTA's All Stations Accessibility Program plan, which doesn't have a prescribed time frame, but it does identify this issue for the ADA accessibility in North and Clybourne Station as a high priority. The Apple funded project was really just for cosmetic upgrades, and a funding source for the accessibility project at that station has not yet been determined, and it's pretty high price tag. In 2017, the estimated cost was $102 million. So that's a big chunk of change to try to find funding for. So that's still an ongoing something that CTA is looking for. The next question is related to COVID again. What hoping that the sidewalk and streets can be used for dining and shopping during COVID social distancing. And I think CDOT has definitely been looking at this throughout the city, right, Bill?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then really, I think we've addressed all of the questions that we've received. So I think that I can just see what we have in terms of the questions that are still open in our chat box. I'm not sure that I'll be able to answer all of them. There is a question about the Career Metro High School, and if there is a status update on that. I don't have a status update on that. I don't know if anyone on this panel can provide an update on that.
I'm sorry, what is that?
The Career Metro High School.
Oh,
The person is saying it's a public nuisance right now.
which one?
I'm not sure. Maybe they're talking about the Near North High Schools.
Mid-North, yeah, they're getting ready
Yeah.
to tear it down.
That is going to be demolished. Didn't they get city council approval fairly recently, and they'll be
Yes, they did, and they got.
they'll
the
be
park.
moving. Okay. So I
Yeah,
don't know if that
yeah.
goes by a different name. I don't know if that goes by Career Metro but I've known it as
It's
the
near
Near
North.
North High School.
Mid-North,
Yeah.
yes. It's getting torn down. As you can see, there's fences up around it already, and they're already working on it. So it's going to be torn down.
Right. Okay, the next question is about adding bike lanes and dedicated space for people along the new Division Street bridges.
I can speak to that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, there'll definitely be pedestrian space. All of our new bridges have ample ADA pedestrian access. I'm not 100% sure of the design off the top of my head for dedicated bike lanes. I know all new bridges do have paneling to allow for bikes to cross them safely. As you see in many of the bridges downtown, around across the river, around the loop, there's the grading that cars can traverse without a problem is often difficult for bikes. So there's a paneling system that they've been using on all new bridges. You can feel free to follow up with me, whoever that was who asked the question, and I can find out for sure. William.Higgins@cityofchicago.org. Feel free to send me an email.
Thanks, Bill. The next question is about this disproportionate balance in the city's north side versus the city's south and west sides, and in terms of investment and planning, and just in terms of what DPD is doing. I mean, we do have the Southwest Invest Southwest initiative for those neighborhoods and community areas on the south and west sides. We have a lot of incentives that we have been working on for years and continually improving on, the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund and other TIF incentives as well. So this is definitely something that is on the top of all of our minds. We did recently adopt a plan, consolidated plan for Woodlawn at Plan Commission, last month. And we also adopted a plan for the South Shore corridors along 79th and 75th Street. And then again, with our Invest Southwest initiative, the department is working with, all of the city agencies, all of the city departments, and we're, galvanizing all of the resources to really change the commercial corridors in those areas. So definitely, it's, we understand that concern. Absolutely.
Cindy, I
And
would just
also-
add, this is, oh, go ahead, Alderman.
Yeah, also, I'll be remiss if I did not mention, folks like Brian over in Lincoln Yards, and I want to thank him you know, in Lincoln Yards, and in some of these developments, they're building on-site affordable housing and they're building off-site affordable housing. And like from Lincoln Yards, some of the affordable housing that's designated for that area is looked to be built on the west side in areas where we don't have development. So some of these things have been leveraged all over the city in some instances, but also in some communities where you don't have any affordable at all, it's encouraged that you do have some affordable in those communities.
And this is Kathy. I would also add that the Department of Planning has recently reorganized. And so we have teams of planners in we've divided the city into 7 regions. Cindy's the main planner, lead planner for the central region, which this is the area we're talking about tonight. But we have lead planners and teams of planners now in these 6 other regions that cover the entire city that are just focused on those regions.
Right. Thank you, Kathy. The next question, there's a smell issue and they don't think it's just about the waste management. This person has said that there's aging sewer infrastructure here and properties suffer from sewer backups and smelly sewer gas emanating from manhole covers. So, I mean, our city is an older city and we do have a combined sewer stormwater system, which, you know, isn't great. I'll be the first to admit, as someone who has dealt with sewage in her basement. You know, the sewer systems do get upgraded as the roads get reconstructed. So, Bill, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Just like we're doing over in the Fulton Market, I think that it would be a good idea if we are going to have more density over in this area, if we do a study and evaluate the sewer systems and infrastructure like we're doing in the Fulton Market, and we can pay that through the TIF in this area. And I wouldn't have a problem with that if Brian does it.
No, I would support you on that as well, Walter.
That would be something really to bring up with Department of Water Management. CDOT certainly coordinates with them on the reconstruction of the roads after their work, but they're the ones that manage the sewers.
Yes. Okay, and then what are we doing to promote inclusion and diversity within the triangle beyond just affordable housing? So I think, I mean, we did talk about the minority participation goals for planned development projects. I don't know if the aldermen have any other initiatives they're working on for this issue, but I know that's something that definitely is something we need to keep looking at and keep working on, of course.
And I'm just going to add with the Wild Miles, one of the main clients is a Near North Unity program, which are primarily the residents of Cabrini and have been in the area for a long time. So, you know, this is not a totally undiverse area, and I think people should be part of the projects like the Wild Mile that are very representative of the city.
Great. So I think that's the last of our questions. I want to thank the panelists and our co-hosts, Alderman Burnett and Alderman Hopkins. Again, you can provide us feedback at dpd@cityofchicago.org if you have any follow-up comments or questions. If you, you know, after this evening, if you're still digesting what we all discussed, feel free to email us. Alderman Burnett and Hopkins, do you have any closing words you want to say to this group?
Alderman Hopkins, you can go. I have food in my mouth right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Burnett. Yeah, just as I said in my opening comments, I want to thank the Department of Planning staff for taking this initiative. They were the ones who realized that the plan needed to be refreshed, and it was due to the real world conditions that they observed. So I appreciate them hitting the start button on this process. I'm very encouraged by the initial steps taken here. And I believe we can get to consensus on what we need to do moving forward. My initial response is that there is a demand for more people to live as residents in this area. So to begin with the premise that we should be responding to what people want makes sense to me. All the work that's been done so far to make this area an attractive and viable community is what makes people want to live here. People from all parts of Chicago, by the way. So to answer the previous question, it's not just the affordable housing component, but it's specific design intentions that can be put forth going forward to make sure it's an area of Chicago that's welcome and open to all Chicagoans. So I think we're on that track, and I'm very encouraged, and I look forward to having this discussion further with the residents, people involved in Ranch Triangle, and others who are on this call. Let's keep this conversation going and keep this moving forward to fruition before the Plan Commission.
And I also want to thank the Department of Planning, all of the people who attended via email and or video. I'd like to thank the Halsted Triangle. Also like to thank North Branch Works. You know, the funny thing about this, 26 years ago when I was alderman, this was my ward, all of it, right? Then later on, it got remapped into the 32nd ward. Then later on, it got remapped back into our ward. Back in 26 years ago, North Branch Works was very adamant about not allowing any residential to go into this area. So I want to thank them for recognizing that things are changing in the community. And I want to commend the Department of Planning for seeing it also. One of the things about retail in neighborhoods, you know, and I find this in the West Loop, you need bodies in the community in order to help sustain the retail that's in the neighborhoods. You cannot just solely depend on outsiders to come into a community in order to hold up the retail in the area. You need a critical mass of people in the area. And I think retail and people living in the community go hand in hand, and it helps to sustain the neighborhood. So I think this is a good plan. I like the fact that, you know, we still had a buffer along the river. You know, one of the things that we take pride in always doing in our whole career is to do development without displacement. We're not trying to help someone else to hurt someone else. So if we can do a compromise and make it where everyone can live in harmony, that's what we're doing, and that's what this plan is doing. We're not going to hurt the businesses on the other side of the river, but at the same time, we're going to allow for the folks on the east side of the river to grow. So I think this is a good plan. I hope that the community embrace it and also give us some input. You know, I mean, this isn't presented to be a dictatorship. This is presented to ask people for their comments, their concerns, and their input and their ideas. And so I just want to thank everyone, and I hope that you all share everything with the Department of Planning. And, you know, although they have a lot of smart people in the Department of Planning and Transportation, but there's always an idea that no one didn't think about. So with that, I want to just say thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Alderman Burnett and Alderman Hopkins. Thank you to the panelists, to everyone who have supported this webinar, and all the folks who have attended. Have a good evening and stay safe and healthy, everyone.